ॐ विश्वन्दर्पणदृश्यमाननगरी तुल्यन्निजान्तर्गतम् पश्यन्नात्मनि मायया बहिरिवोद्भूतं यथा निद्रया यः साक्षात् कुरुते प्रबोधसमये स्वात्मानमेवाद्वयम् तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये नारायणं पद्मभुवं वसिष्ठं शक्तिं च तत्पुत्रपराशरं च व्यासं शुकं गौडपदं महान्तं गोविन्दयोगीन्द्रमथास्य शिष्यं श्रीशङ्कराचार्यमथास्य पद्मपादं च हस्तामलकं च शिष्यं दन्तोटकं वार्तिककारमन्यान् अस्मद्गुरून् सन्ततमानतोऽस्मि श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः परब्रह्मनिष्ठं स्वतो धर्मनिष्ठम् अहिंसैकनिष्ठं स्वशिष्यै सुजुष्टं यतीनां वरिष्ठं गुरूणां गरिष्ठं दयानन्दरूपं मदाचार्यमीडे नमः श्रीपरमार्थाय संसाराध्यासनाशिने श्रोत्रियब्रह्मनिष्ठाय तस्मै ब्रह्मविदे नमः सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् ॐ तपोभिः क्षीणपापानां शान्तानां वीतरागिणां
तपोभिक्षीणपापानां शान्तानां वीतरागिणां मुमुक्षूणाम् अपेक्षोऽयम्
आत्मबोधो विधीयते
आत्मबोधो विधीयते।
I welcome you all to the 9th class of the Atma Bodha series. We will chant verses 12, 13 and 14 that we covered in the last class, review them and then move on to the next verses.
पञ्चीकृतमहाभूत
संभवं कर्म संचितम् शरीरं सुखदुःखानां भोगायतनमुच्यते पंचप्राणमनो
बुद्धि
दशेन्द्रियसमन्वितम्
अपञ्चीकृतभूतोत्थम्
सूक्ष्मांगं भोगसाधनम् अनाद्य विद्या निर्वाच्य कारणोपाधिरुच्यते उपाधितृतयादन्यम् आत्मानम् अवधारयेत् Before the world came into existence, Brahman alone was there. And Brahman is the changeless, imperishable, all-pervading consciousness. But since Brahman is changeless, it cannot account for the plurality that we see here. Therefore, we say that a second factor was also there, which doesn't have its independent existence. It depends upon Brahman for its existence. And this second factor is Maya. Maya is the entire Jagat in an unmanifest form. Just as the entire movie that is about to emerge is unmanifest in the DVD. So Brahman is the changeless material cause, the Vivarta Upadana Karanam. And Maya is the changing material cause, the Parinami Upadana Karanam. Because Maya changes from being unmanifest to becoming manifest. Whereas Brahman remains changeless and provides existence and consciousness for the entire Jagat. And as we said, Maya has got two powers, Vikshepa Shakti and Avarana Shakti. With the Vikshepa Shakti, Maya evolves into these varieties of Namarupas that we see. Jaganti, Sargasthiti, Dayanyanti, as we saw. Budbudani va Varini. Vyaktaya Sarva Vividhaha. Atake Katagadivate. So worlds emerge from Brahman associated with Maya. Worlds emerge like bubbles emerging in the waters. And beings emerge. Vyaktayaha vividhaha sarvaha. Like ornaments emerging from gold. It gives two examples that we saw. What both of these examples indicate is that no new substance is ever created. Creation never involves the creation of a new substance. Creation is always creation of Nama Rupa only. Therefore, this entire worlds that emerge, they're all Nama Rupa. Beings that emerge, they're all Nama Rupa. Nama Rupatmakam Jagat. Now, if we take the beings, then we took the example of pot. Space gets as though enclosed within pots. And then we start talking about the plurality of spaces, and spaces are given names and forms. Similarly, the Brahman, that is the changeless consciousness, as though gets enclosed within these shariras of the beings. So the bodies of the beings become the upadhi within which Brahman becomes as though enclosed. And that's why each being says, I am conscious. Why? Because there is enclosed Brahman. But now the Avarana Shakti of Maya comes in. And Avarana Shakti means the concealing power of Maya. And because of the concealing power of Maya, this Jiva forgets the original Brahman nature, his own original Brahman nature. The very word the Jiva is using, this I, is really pointing at Brahman, that is the Upadana Karanam, enclosed within the body of the Jiva. Like space is enclosed, as though enclosed within the pot. The I is really referring to Brahman, but then because of the Avarana Shakti of Maya, this Jiva forgets that I am Brahman. And then, Nano Padhi Vashadeva. This up. Bhinnavad bhati, tad bhedat bhinnavad bhati. Nanopadhi, Nanopadhigataha. Nanopadhigataha. This because it's enclosed within these upadhis, the Brahman appears to be now different. There appears to be a multitude of consciousnesses associated with different names and forms. And Nanopadhi Vashadeva Jati Varnashramadeyaha. The attributes of the body are then taken to be my attributes. So this is the process that Bhagavad Pada is telling us. And then Bhagavad Pada zoomed in into the Upadhi and said that the Upadhi is really Upadhi Tritayad. Upadhi Tritayaha. So there are three Upadhis. The Sthula Sharira, Sukshma Sharira and Karana Sharira. And we analyzed each of these three Upadhis from the perspective of five criteria: perceptibility, materials, function, constituents, and nature. So if we take perceptibility, the Sthula Sharira, my Sthula Sharira is perceptible to me and perceptible to you. My Sukshma Sharira is only experienceable by me, not by you. Whereas my Karana Sharira is neither perceptible to me nor perceptible to you. Then we came to the materials. As the word Sthula Sharira indicates, it is made of Sthula materials, Sthula Panchabhutas, Panchikrita Panchabhutas. And that's why it is visible to the senses. When we come to the Sukshma Sharira, though, it's made of the Apanchikrita Panchabhutas. So it's made of Sukshma Panchabhutas, which are really fine materials that are capable of reflecting consciousness. That's why the Sukshma Sharira is able to borrow consciousness from Atma. And then we talked about the Karana Sharira being made of this unmanifest matter. That is the most primordial form of matter, which is at the same level as Maya. And therefore, it is not visible to me nor visible to you. And then we talked about the functions of the three bodies. The entire purpose of creation is to provide the infrastructure for the jivas to get the results of their punya papas. And therefore, the equipment is required for the jiva, through which the jiva can interact with the world and experience sukha and dukkha. As we saw, for the sthula sharira, the function is sukha dukkhanam bhogayatanam uchyate. It is the tenement, it is the abode occupied by the jiva, through which the interaction with the world becomes possible, because of which the jiva can get sukha and dukkha. And what about the sukshma sharira? As we saw, the purpose of the sukshma sharira is first of all to enliven the sthula sharira. So the sukshma sharira borrows consciousness from Atma, becomes sentient, and then lends this sentiency to the sthula sharira. And then the sukshma sharira also provides the instruments of interaction, the input organs and the output organs. The input organs in the form of organs of knowledge, the Pañca Jnanendriyas, and the output organs in the form of organs of action, the Pañca Karmendriyas. And what is the function of the Karana Sharira? We saw Karanopadhir Uchyate. It is a Karana for the Sukshma and Sthula Sharira. Sharira Dvayasya Karana Matram, as we saw in Tattva Bodha. So during pralayam, the sthula and sukshma shariras become unmanifest. They are no longer there. Only the karana sharira is there. And then during the next srishti, the karana sharira brings out the sukshma and sthula shariras. So this is the function of the karana sharira. What are the constituents? For the sthula sharira, constituents are visible to our senses. There's a head, there's a neck, there's a torso, limbs, etc. Or if we take the sthula sharira of an earthworm, it is something really long, no limbs, no head, no torso, it's just a long thing. Varies based on the type of body that the jiva gets associated with. The constituents of the sukshma sharira are 17. Pañca prana, mano buddhi, dashendriya samanvitam. Pancha prana, manas, buddhi, and dashendriya, pancha jnanendriyas, pancha karmendriya. 17 in one. And what are the constituents of the karana sharira? We say it is meaningless to talk about the constituents of the karana sharira because karana sharira cannot even be seen. How can the constituents be seen? But all we can say is the karana sharira contains the entire jiva in an unmanifest form. And it also includes the entire sanchita karmas of the jiva. The complete bundle of sanchita karma of the jiva is there in an unmanifest form in the karana sharira. These are the constituents. And what about the nature? As we saw, the sthula sharira has the shortest life amongst the three bodies. It's born with birth and goes with death. Lasts only for one janma. The sthula sharira cannot be carried forward to the next janma. The sukshma sharira, though, has a much longer lifespan. It comes into existence during srishti. After the pancha, sukshma pancha mahabhutas originate from Brahman associated with Maya, they configure themselves into the sukshma sharira of every jeev. And how long does this last? We say that the sukshma sharira survives the death of the physical body. And when does it go? The sukshma sharira continues being associated with various physical bodies until pralayam. And the entire Srishti goes into an unmanifest form, into Maya. At that time, the Sukshma Sharira also becomes unmanifest. And what about the Karana Sharira? When does it begin? Anadi, avidya, anirvachya. Anadi. Anadi meaning beginningless. And as we saw, utpatti, shunyatvam, anaditvam. It is never produced. And therefore, it is called beginningless. It is always a cause. It is never an effect. Only an effect is produced. Karana Sharira is never an effect. It's always a cause. You can call it a causeless cause. It's a cause, but itself does not have a cause. And the Karana Sharira during Srishti brings out the Sukshma Sharira and the Sthula Sharira. But it survives the death of the physical body and it survives pralayam also. We said the Karana Sharira is really stubborn, refuses to go. During pralayam also. Why? Well, avidya, so the nature of ignorance. As we have repeatedly said, ignorance is one thing in this creation that doesn't have a natural date of death. Everything else has an expiry date. Ignorance does not have a natural expiry date. How does it go? It goes only with knowledge. So in that janma in which the jiva gains Atma-Jnanam and attains moksha, in that janma, when that jiva's physical body falls, that's called videha mukti. At that time, the stula sharira disintegrates. The sukshma sharira also disintegrates because it's a jnani jiva. Not be called a jiva also because it's a jnani. And the karana sharira also disintegrates. This is the longest lifetime of the karana sharira. Throughout the journey of the jiva, across multiple lifetimes and across multiple srishtis, only one karana sharira for that jiva, which goes with videha mukti. So Bhagavad says, Upadhi tatayadanyam atmanam avadharaye. To know yourself as the Atma, Atmanam avadharaye. How? Upadhi tatayad anyam. You are none of these three bodies. You are the Atma. Know yourself as the Atma. And the Atma is nothing but another name for Brahman. Brahman, which is as though enclosed within this upadhi tatayam, within this threefold upadhis. That is called Atma. It is just renamed as being Atma. Just as space enclosed within the pot is called in a manner of saying enclosed space, even though it's not really enclosed as we have seen. Similarly, the enclosed Brahman within quotes is given the name Atma. Know yourself as the Atma. In fact, as we have said, Upanishad is not very particular about distinguishing Atma versus Brahman terminology. In fact, Upanishads also use them interchangeably. In places where we expect that the Upanishad might use Brahman, saying that Brahman was there before the creation. Upanishad says Atma was there before the creation. Now, Upanishads freely interchange these terms also. We can also take Atma here to mean Brahman. Know yourself as Brahman, that is different from these three upadhis. So really speaking, it is the avarana shakti of Maya that makes the jiva forget that I am really Brahman. And as we have said, that when the adhishthanam is not known, then adhyasa happens. When the rope is not known as a rope, then it is mistaken to be a snake. Similarly, the jiva doesn't know that I am really Brahman. The jiva mistakes this I to be something else other than what it is. Therefore, a mix-up happens. A mix-up with the upadhis happens. The jiva takes these projected mithya upadhis to be myself. Jiva says, I am this body, I am this mind. This mix-up is discussed in the next shloka. We will read that. Panchakoshadiyogena
पञ्चकोशादियोगेन
tattanmaya iva sthitah
तत्तन्मय इव स्थितः
शुद्धात्मा नीलवस्त्रादि
शुद्धात्मा नीलवस्त्रादि
योगेन स्फटिको यथा
योगेन स्फटिको यथा
Here, Bhagavad-pada is introducing the term Pañca Kosha. Pañca Kośādi yogena, in association with the Pañca Kośas. So Kosha literally means a cover. Like a sword has got a cover. It's called Kosha. So Kosha literally means something that covers. So here the three sharirams are again reclassified as Panchakoshas. Panchakoshas are not something new. It is just a reclassification of the Sharira Trayam. So we look at the Panchakoshas. There are five koshas: Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, and Anandamaya. Three sharirams on one hand, Panchakoshas on the other side. How do the three shariras map to the Panchakoshas? The Sthula Sharira is renamed as Annamaya Kosha. Annamaya Kosha. And the Karana Sharira, which is the third one, is renamed as Anandamaya Kosha. So now what are we left with? The Sukshma Shariram. The Sukshma Shariram is divided into the middle three: Pranamaya, Manomaya, and Vijnanamaya. You see in Pancha Prana Manobuddhi. Pancha Prana Manobuddhi Dashendriya Samanvita. So the Pancha Pranas become Pranamaya Kosha. Manas becomes Manomaya Kosha. Buddhi is Vijnanamaya Kosha. The mapping. So now there is a misconception here that these koshas are some physical covers for Atma. So this is not the right understanding of the kosha. Like there is Atma, and then there are five covers that are totally hiding the Atma. Pujya Swamiji gives an example here. It's a kind of a funny story that Pujya Swamiji once knew somebody, and this was a long time ago in the 1950s or so, when he was probably still in his late teens or early 20s or something like that. So this person told Swamiji that he had this precious stone, and he wanted to show it to Swamiji. So Swamiji asked him, "What stone is it? Why are you so intent on showing it?" So he said, "You have to see it. You have to come with me. A very precious stone." And at that time, he said it was some 60,000 rupees or something like that, which was a lot of money for that time, especially. So then he took Swamiji somewhere, and I don't know if it was a bank or his house or whatever. But he opened some steel door first. There was a steel door. So he opened the steel door that led into some room, small room. And inside that room there was a safe. And then he opened that safe. Now inside that safe there was another box. And then he took out that box and he looked around, making sure nobody was there, and then he placed the box. And then he opened the box. And inside that box there was some velvet box kind of a thing. So he took that and he opened that. And inside that, now you see the materials are also getting finer here, right? In steel door, and then the materials are also getting finer. Then there's a velvet box, and inside that there was some very thin paper, white paper kind of thing. So he took that, and then he opened it. And inside this there was a glittering gem. And he showed it to someone. "You've seen it?" he said. And he said yes. As soon as he said yes, he closed it and put it inside. And then he then again put everything and he closed the whole thing, and they were outside. Even before Swamiji could would say he has seen it. They were standing outside the steel door. Swamiji points out that there is this idea about the Pañca Kośas. So Atma is likened to this jewel that has all these coverings, and then you have to remove these coverings one by one, and then have a quick sight of the Atma, and then you come back. And then this is said to be Atma Darshana. So this is really not the case. Because, see, in this case, when we take the jewel and all of these boxes, they're all in the same order of reality. When the cover is in the same order of reality as what is covered, then it can really cover what is being covered. This is where we repeatedly come back to this theme of Satyam and Mithya. So if two things like this stone and the paper or the velvet box or the safe or whatever coverings you take, they are all in the same order of reality. But if we take Satyam and Mithya, can Mithya really cover what is Satyam? Mithya can never really cover what is Satyam. Why? Because Mithya doesn't exist independent of Satyam at all. Wherever Mithya is, Satyam is right there, because Satyam is what provides existence to the Mithya. In fact, Mithya is only Nama and Rupa. The substance is the Satyam, is the substance. So when we're looking at the Mithya, you're looking at the substance. Without looking at the substance, you cannot see a Mithya Vastu. So Mithya cannot cover Satyam at all. It's like saying that the pot has covered the clay. You're looking at the pot. You are looking at clay. How can pot cover the clay? But if one doesn't understand the Satyam, then the Mithya is mistaken to be the Satyam. This is the covering of the Satyam. As we have seen, one of the Satyam Mithya principles is when the Satyam is not known, the Mithya is mistaken to be the Satyam. So now, let us imagine that the pot had some sentiency, right? So the enclosed space was some kind of a conscious entity. Now the pot says that I am a pot. Instead of saying I am clay, then we can say that the pot has covered the clay. Then the pot becomes a kosha that covers the clay. Why? Because the pot has identified with the potness. It has identified with the pot and not with the clay. Because it doesn't know about the clay, let us. So similarly, when I don't know the nature of the Atma, that is the core of my being, like the clay is the core of the pot's being. But if the pot doesn't know the clay, then the pot says, I am a pot. Then the pot becomes a kosha that covers the clay. Similarly, if I don't know who I am really, that I am the Atma that is one with Brahman, if I don't know that, then I take the upadhi to be me. I say, I am this upadhi, body, mind, whatever. Then that upadhi becomes a kosha that covers the Atma. So if I say, for example, that I am 40 years old, then this body was born 40 years ago. So the 40 years is really an attribute of the body. But when I say I am 40 years old, I have mistaken, the Atma has been mistaken to be the body. Atma means I. When I say I am the body, Atma has been mistaken to be the body, therefore the body becomes a kosha, which is the Annamaya kosha. Similarly, I can say that I am emotional, I am agitated. Now, being emotional, being agitated are the attributes of the mind. So the mind becomes a kosha when I say I am agitated, I am emotional. Then the Atma has been mistaken to be the mind, has been mixed up with the mind. Therefore, the mind is covering the Atma as the mind becomes the manomaya kosha. Similarly, I can say I am hungry, I am thirsty. Hunger and thirst really belong to the prana, are a product of the pranas, functioning of the pranas. So I've mistaken the function of the pranas to be me when I say I am hungry, I am thirsty. The pranas have as though covered the Atma. Therefore, they become the pranamaya kosha. Similarly, I say that I am the doer of certain actions, or I am making this decision. Atma is mistaken to be the intellect, and therefore the intellect becomes the Vijnanamaya kosha. Or I say that I am happy. And the happiness that I'm talking about is a state that comes and goes. I was happy yesterday. In between, I was not happy. I am happy now. And this happiness is not going to last. It will last for some time and then go. When I'm talking about this happiness as a state of experience that comes and goes, then that is also covering the real nature of the Atma. I'm identifying with that happiness, Atma with that happiness, and saying, I am happy. Atma is happy. And that happiness itself becomes the Anandamaya Kosha. There is a difference between Atma's nature being happiness, Ananda, versus the experiential happiness that comes and goes. We had talked about this in detail in Tattva Bodha. Atma's nature is happiness. But then when I say I am happy and that happiness is a state that comes and goes, I'm not talking about the nature of Atma there. I'm talking about a state of experience that comes and goes, which is not the same as the nature of happiness, that nature of the Atma that is happiness. So there is a difference between the two. Atma being happiness by nature is happiness that never comes and goes. Whereas the experiential happiness comes and goes. When I identify with the experiential happiness and say I am happy, that is the Anandamaya Kosha. It is not Ananda, that is the nature of the Atma. That is also a Kosha. So Pañca Kośādi Yogena, because of not understanding the real nature of the Atma, the Upadhis are mistaken to be the Atma. So this is the Pañca Kośādi Yogena. The Atma gets mixed up with the Upadhis, the Pañca Kośas, and they become the Pañca Kośas that cover the Atma. Tattanmaya ivastitaha. So really speaking, Satyam can never have any connection or relationship with Mithya at all. Two things can have a relationship. only when they are in the same order of reality. Like this person can never get married to the girl that this person saw in his dream because they are of two different orders of reality. Similarly, Atma being Satyam can never have any yoga with Anatma at all because Anatma is Mithya. But still, we are talking about Pañca Kośadi Yogena. We are talking about the union with the Pañca Kośa. Why? How does this union come about if the union is impossible? We say, really speaking, this union is impossible. But then, Ajnanam makes the impossible possible. The union happens only because of Ajnanam. Panchakoshadi yogena, this union with the Panchakosha solely because of Ajnanam. I'm not understanding the nature of Atma. The Atma cannot have any union at all with Mithya because it is Satya. Ajnanam, which is Maya, Maya's Avarana Shakti, makes the impossible possible. So then Atma now appears to be endowed with the attributes of these upadhis. Tattanmaya ivastitaha. So Satyam Atma becomes endowed with the attributes of the Mithya Upadhis, like I am 40 years old, I am agitated, I am emotional, I am hungry, I am thirsty. So it's somewhat like a dream, because this person who is really rich, he goes to sleep and then he dreams that he has lost all his money somehow and is wandering about in rags. So these rags are really an attribute of the dream individual. And then he says, I have become very poor. I'm suffering in poverty, this poverty that is really an attribute of the dream individual. Now he says, I am poor. I have poverty. When really speaking, the waker is utterly unaffected by what is going on. But when he wakes up, he sees that this poverty was mithya. It was something I had projected and then become identified with that. It is really not the Satyam. It was impossible for me. It was impossible for me to have any union with it at all. I am utterly unaffected by whatever happens in the dream. The situation is exactly similar here. But ignorance makes the impossible happen. Sometimes we watch the movie, and during the movie we become identified with a particular character. So when that particular character is having a good time, then there are all these comedy scenes, and they are laughing along with the character. But when the character is going through some tragic times, then one is weeping along with the character. Even though that movie can never really affect me, completely independent of the movie. But still, identification makes this happen. And at least in case of the movie, there's some kind of a deliberate identification there. But here, the identification arises out of ignorance. Therefore, even in the movie, we remember that this is not real. But here we have forgotten the fact that it is unreal. All this, whatever is happening, appears very real to me. So whatever happens to the Pañca Kośas happens to me. All because of ignorance and subsequent identification. Tat tanmaya ivastitaha. So Bhagavad gives an example which we have discussed before, but it's always worthwhile revisiting this example. Nīla-vastrādi yogena sphatiko yatha. He gives the example of sphatikaha. So sphatikaha means this crystal. And the crystal is said to be crystal clear. We generally talk about clarity. When we talk about clarity, like we said, I went to Meghalaya. Meghalaya, in a certain part, that water was crystal clear water. So the crystal has become a standard for us when we talk about clarity. We give the example of a crystal because crystal is very clear. Or when we talk about clarity in thinking, we say this person's thoughts are clear as a crystal. Crystal clear thinking means no confused thinking. So here we take the example of the crystal. And let's say Nila Vastradi Yogena, we place a blue cloth next to it. Then Tattanmaya Ivastitaha. The crystal appears to be blue now. And now let's say we take the blue cloth away and place a green cloth. The crystal appears to be green. Take the green cloth away, place a red cloth. Crystal appears to be red. But really speaking, the crystal is not undergoing any change at all. Shuddha Spatika, like Shuddhatma, Shuddha Spatika. There is no impurity in the crystal at all. It remains clear ever, always remains clear. In spite of the colors appearing in the crystal, it is unaffected. But then a child who doesn't know the nature of the crystal, the child will say the crystal is changing colors. It was blue, then the blueness went away, it became green, then the greenness went away. It became red. So factually, there is no change happening in the crystal at all. It remains colorless, utterly unaffected all the time. But for somebody who knows that the crystal is always crystal clear, and all these are just appearances in the crystal, they don't affect the crystal at all. For that person, it's not necessary to remove the cloth also. Even in the presence of the cloth, he says the crystal is 100% crystal clear. Even at this time, this is just an appearance. It's a mithya appearance, not the satya. Similarly, Shuddhatma, Atma is ever Shuddha. Like Shuddha Spatika, Shuddhatma. So the Pañca Kośas are comparable to these cloth that is changing colors. So we can talk about there being 5 different colors. So as the cloth changes to go from one color to the other, the crystal is now comparable to the Atma. Pañca Kośas are like changing different colored clothes, changing colors next to the crystal. But Atma ever remains Shuddha. When we say Atma, it really me. So I am totally unsullied, unaffected by the state of the Mithya Pañca Kośas because I am the Satya. I remain as the Satchit Atma no matter what state changes the Pañca Kośas goes through. So the body changes from Balyam, Yauvanam, Kaumaram, Jara. The body goes through this babyhood, childhood, boyhood, youthhood, and finally old age. So a person who is ignorant, who doesn't know the nature of the Atma as being Shuddha Atma, he will say, I was. a baby at one point. I was a boy. I was young. Now I am old. So all of these transitions are happening to me. But for somebody who understands the nature of the Atma, he will say that Atma really doesn't acquire or lose any of these attributes at all. Even if the Pañca Kośas are changing, the Atma is totally unaffected. न जायते म्रियते वा कदाचित् नायं भूत्वा भविता वा न भूयः अजो नित्यः शाश्वतोऽयं पुराणः न हन्यते हन्यमाने शरीरे. Bhagavan Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, न जायते म्रियते वा कदाचित्. Man never born. Even if the body is born, the body is born, all right. Atma is never born. Body goes through various changes. Asti, jayate, vardhate, viparinamate, apakshiyate. Finally, vinashyati. The body dies. Atma doesn't go through any of these changes. Atma does not die along with the body also. Namriyate, kadachit. Ajaha, nityaha. Ajaha means unborn. Nityaha, eternal. Shashvataha, changeless. Puranaha, Atma ever new. Even though Atma can be said to be ancient, beginningless, it is still ever new, Purana. So in my presence, all of this Jagrat Prapancha and Swapna Prapancha comes and goes, but I am utterly unaffected. Nila Vastradi Yogena Shuddha Spatikaha Yatha. Tatha Shuddhatma. पंचकोशादि योगेन तत्तन्मय इव स्थितः किंतु शुद्धात्मा सर्वदा शुद्धात्मा भवति. So now we come to the next shloka. वपुस्तुषादिभिः कोशैः
वपुस्तुषादिभिः कोशैः
युक्तं युक्त्यवघाततः
युक्तं युक्त्यवधाततः
आत्मानम् अन्तरं शुद्धम्
आत्मानम् अन्तरं शुद्धं
विविच्यात् तण्डुलं यथा.
विविच्यात् तण्डुलं यथा.
So with the shloka that we just completed, Pañca Kośādi Yogena, the explanation of the adhyasa is over. So adhyasa is the mistake or error or mix-up that happens because of ignorance. There's Ātma-Ajnanam that leads to adhyasa, which is the mix-up that we talked about. Tattanmaya iva sthitah. And that is what leads to my conclusion of apurnatvam also. I say I am limited, I am mortal. Why? Because there's a mix-up with the upadhis. And this is the cause of samsara, as we have seen. Once I take myself to be apurnaha, there follows the endless struggle for purnatva. Is invariably follows next. So any adhyasa, which is error, mistake, mix-up, superimposition, it goes only with the knowledge of the adhishthanam. As we have seen, tavat satyam jagat bhati shuptika rajatan yatha yavan na jnayate brahma. So as long as the shell is not known, the silver will be taken to be real. The silver is a mistaken appearance on the shell, where the sunlight is reflected and the shell appears to be bright. One mistakes it for a silver, and the silver is mistaken as long as the shell is not known. So as long as Brahman, the Adhishthanam, is not known, this Jagat will be taken to be real. Bhavat Satyam Jagat Bhati. So until Atma-Jnanam comes, the ignorance continues, and the adhyasa of mistaking myself to be something or the other, that also continues. And even death does not solve this problem. Because as we have seen, Sukshma Sharira survives death. So the ignorance continues. The Sukshma and Karana Sharira survive death. The ignorance continues. The next birth, the ignorant Jiva re-emerges, the adhyasa re-emerges. And even pralayam doesn't solve this problem. Because even after pralayam, the Jiva re-emerges, the ignorant Jiva re-emerges in the next Srishti. So adhyasa continues, apurnatvam continues, samsara continues. So up to this verse 15, starting from verse 6 to verse 15, we had discussed this adhyasa problem and how it is responsible for samsara. And verses number 1 to 5, Bhagavad had said, Jnanam alone is the solution. So now the question is how to gain this Atma-Jnanam. And as we have said, consistent and systematic study of Vedanta for a length of time under a qualified Acharya. This is how one gains Jnanam through Shravanam. And Shravanam, an essential part of Shravanam is Ātma-Anātma Viveka. Sorting out this mix-up that I have gotten into. I have to first sort out this mix-up. So I have to identify the Atma from this mix-up of Atma and Anatma. So that is what this verse is starting now. Vapustushadibhi koshaihi yuktam yuktavaghatataha atmanam antaram shuddham vivicyat tandulam yatha. So here, this verse is now getting more into this upadhi tritayadanyam atmanam avadharayet that Bhagavad had said in verse 14. That we should know the Atma as different from these upadhis. So this Ātma-Anātma Viveka is now being elaborated here. That is required because we are in a state of mix-up. So here, to understand this mix-up and how it is sorted out, we will first take one Vyavaharika example and then come to this particular shloka. So the moon is not self-luminous. So the moon appears to be bright. And why does the moon appear to be bright? Because it borrows light, borrows luminosity from the sun. The moon doesn't have its own light. But a child who doesn't know all this, he's going to look at the moon and say that the moon is bright. The moon has its own light. This is moonlight. The moonlight belongs to the moon. So this is because this child has got sunlight, moon, avivekaha. The child has mixed up sunlight and the moon. He doesn't understand that the sunlight is a separate principle. That is illuminating the moon, but is not part of the moon. A person who knows, who has done sunlight, moon, vichara, person who has done sunlight, moon, vichara, knows that the sunlight is on the moon, but sunlight is not off the moon. So he knows that sunlight is an independent principle which is unaffected by the moon. So from this we can come to 5 principles of sunlight. That sunlight is not a part, product, or property of the moon. Sunlight is not a part, product or property of the moon. Sunlight is an independent principle that pervades the moon and illumines, makes the moon bright. This is the second principle. The third principle is that sunlight is not limited by the boundaries of the moon. Sunlight extends beyond the moon also. Then the fourth principle is that the sunlight continues even if the moon goes. No, the sunlight is not a part, product, or property of the moon. The sunlight continues to exist even when the moon goes. And the last one is that in the absence of the moon, the sunlight that continues to exist is not manifest, but it still exists. So it is not non-existent. In the absence of the moon, the sunlight is still there, but there is no reflecting medium to manifest the sunlight. And therefore, the sunlight, even though it is very much there, it is just not manifest. It continues to exist. So these are the 5 principles of sunlight. And if one knows this, the 5 principles of the sunlight, then such a person doesn't have this aviveka, which the child had, where the child had mixed up the sunlight and the moon and said the moon has its own light. So now let us come to our situation. The 3 bodies, they are inert. Inert meaning that they are jadavastu. They don't have their own consciousness. But then these bodies, we say they are conscious. So this is like us saying that the light, that the moon has light. We say bodies are conscious. Really speaking, how do they become conscious? Because they borrow consciousness from Atma, that is of the nature of consciousness. The 3 bodies inherently have no consciousness at all, because they are matter. Matter is Anatma. So now the ignorant one says that his body mind has got consciousness. Consciousness belongs to the body mind. This is like saying light belongs to the moon. So where there are really 2 entities, in that case the moon and sunlight, in this case this body and Atma, the consciousness. There are 2 entities, but he sees only one entity. He sees the moon with its own light. Here he sees the body with its own consciousness. Really speaking, there are 2 entities. So from this mix-up, one has to separate out what is what. When an informed person knows that the consciousness is on the body-mind, but consciousness is not off the body-mind. Like light is on the moon, but light is not off the moon. So from this we get these 5 principles of consciousness, which Vedanta teaches us. Consciousness is not a part, product, or property of the body-mind. Consciousness is an independent principle that pervades the body-mind and illumines the body-mind. Consciousness is not limited by the boundaries of the body-mind. Consciousness continues to exist even after the body-mind goes. And lastly, the consciousness that continues to exist even after the body-mind goes. We cannot say it is not existent. It is just not manifest, that's all. Why is it not manifest? Because medium for manifestation is not there, but it continues to exist. So here, like we said, sunlight is not a part, product, or property of the moon. Really, consciousness is not a part, product, or property of the body-mind. It is clearly not a part of the body-mind. Like the parts are things like your hair, nails, skin, kidney, liver, etc. Those are parts of the body. Consciousness is not a part of the body. Just like sunlight cannot be said to be a part of the moon. Consciousness is not a product of the body mind also. The product of the body mind are things like blood and enzymes, etc. Consciousness is not such a product. In fact, science thinks that consciousness is somehow a product of the body mind, where science thinks that consciousness arises because of some biochemical processes. Vedanta totally rejects this idea, saying matter can never produce consciousness. Just like sunlight is not a product of the moon. Sunlight is not appearing on the moon because of some reactions on the moon. Similarly, consciousness is not a property of the body mind also. Property of the body means height, weight, etc. Attribute of the body. Consciousness is not an attribute of the body, just like sunlight is not some attribute of the moon. Similarly, now we come to the second principle. That consciousness is an independent principle that pervades the body mind and enlivens the body mind. Just like sunlight is an independent principle that pervades the moon and illuminates the moon. The third one is consciousness is not limited by the boundaries of the body mind. Just like sunlight is not limited by the boundaries of the moon. The sunlight appears on the moon and we call it moonlight. But even on this side of the moon, that side of the moon, sunlight is still there. Sunlight is all pervasive in space. But it appears only where the moon is, because that's where the reflecting medium is. If I were to send a rocket with a huge mirror and place it next to the moon, then I will see that there is sunlight there also. But in the absence of that mirror, I am somehow saying that sunlight is limited to the moon. That is aviveka. Sunlight is there all around the moon. Then the consciousness survives even when the body-mind goes. It's like even if the moon were to be removed, the consciousness is still there. The sunlight is still there. Just like I send a reflecting surface to the space, a mirror, a huge mirror to the space. As long as the mirror is there, I will see the sunlight there. When I remove the mirror, it's not that the sunlight is not there, just the mirror is gone. The sunlight is still very much there. And the surviving consciousness cannot be transacted with, not because it is not there, but because there is no medium. Just like even when the moon is removed, the sunlight continues to exist. These are the 5 principles of consciousness. So now let us come to the shloka. Vapustushadibhihi koshaihi yuktam yukti avaghatataha. So yukti avaghatataha is yukti avaghatataha. Atmanam antaram shuddham vivichyat tandulam yatha. So here Bhagavad-pada is giving the example of rice. Tandulam. Tandulam means rice. And when we harvest rice, it's always in the form of paddy. It always comes with this husk that surrounds the rice. So tusha refers to husk. So the rice has to be separated from this paddy, from this husk that surrounds it. So now we see that if we try to eat the rice with this outer cover, it pricks the tongue and you can't eat it. It's dukkha hetu. It's a source of sorrow if you try to eat it. It will prick you all over the place and you can't digest it. It will lead to all kinds of health problems. But the rice inside, when it's cooked, and eaten, consumed, then it's a source of nourishment, the sukha hetu. So the outer cover is dukkha hetu, where the rice inside is sukha hetu. The idea is to compare this Atma and the Pañca Kośas. The Ātmā is inside, as though inside the Pañca Kośas are the outer covers, which are the cause of sorrow. So we cannot throw everything away. Therefore, this outer cover, this tusha, has to be given up. How is it given up? They pound the rice. Avaghatataha. Avaghata means hitting it, pounding it. So yatha tushadibhihi yuktam tandulam, like this rice which is associated with tushadibhihi, with this husk, etc. Avaghatataha, by pounding it. By pounding it. And the pounding is done by placing this rice in some huge this pestle, I think they call it mortar and pestle kind of a thing, where they hit it. Right? This has to be done very carefully, because if you hit it too hard, then the rice can get powdered. So it has to be done carefully. So avaghatataha vivichyat. Vivichyat means separated. Vivekam kuryat. This rice has to be separated from the husk through this process of pounding. So similarly, Atmanam Antaram Shuddham. So Atmanam Antaram, the inner Atma. Atmanam Antaram refers to inner Atma. And it's ever pure, Shuddham, as we have seen, because it's Satyam. Satyam can never be affected by Mithya. So just like the sunlight, if we take the example of sunlight, the sunlight is never affected by the coming and the going of the moon. The sunlight can be said to be Shuddham. Similarly, the Atma being Satyam is never affected by the conditions of the Mithya Anatmas. Atmanam Antaram Shuddham. But the Atma is associated with some covers, which is Vapus Tushadhibhihi Koshaihi. So Vapuhu refers to this body. So the body is compared to the husk. This body and other koshas, they are compared to the husk, which cover the rice. Similarly, the Atma is associated with these coverings of the Pañca Kośas. Vapustushadhibhihi koshaihi yuktam Atmanam Antaram Shuddham. Vivicyat. Vivicyat means Vivekam Kuryat. May you separate them. Why? Why do I need to separate? Because I have mixed them up. What have I mixed up the Atma with? I have mixed up with Anatma. What kind of mix-up is this? Just like we go back to our sunlight moon example. The sunlight and the moon have been mixed up by the child. The child says that the moon is bright. And the child says that the light is limited to the boundaries of the moon. The light is circular. On a full moon night, he says, look at that circular light on the moon, which is off the moon. Circular light of the moon. So here there's a mix-up that has happened. Sunlight and the moon have been mixed up by the child. So this is called Anyonya Adhyasa, mutual superimposition of moon and sunlight. So now this moon is comparable to Anatma and sunlight is comparable to Ātma. So in our case, we have done this Ātma-Anātma mix-up. Why? Because of Ātma-Anātma Viveka. So I say this body-mind is sentient. This body-mind is really speaking inert. But I say this body-mind has consciousness of its own. So this is superimposing consciousness on the body and mind. And then I say, I am limited, I am mortal. So the body is mortal. So this is superimposing the attributes of the body upon the Atma, which is me. So this Anyonya Adhyasa has happened here also. Why? Because of Ātma-Anātma Viveka. So like the child made a khichdi of the moon and sunlight. And made a khichdi means a mixture. So similarly, I have made a mixture of Atma and Anatma, a khichdi of Atma and Anatma. And then I'm suffering. I'm saying I am Apurnaha, and then I'm suffering. Samsara, struggling in life. So now, just like with sunlight, moon, Viveka, one understands that sunlight is really an independent principle. Moon is separate, sunlight is separate. The sunlight is not affected at all by the coming and going of the moon. Similarly, with Ātma-Anātma Viveka, I should learn to claim that I am this independent consciousness, unaffected by the body mind. Body mind is only a temporary medium, just like the moon is a medium for the manifestation of sunlight. Similarly, this body mind is a medium for manifestation of consciousness. This consciousness is a separate principle that is unaffected by the body mind. But then how do I do this separation? In case of the paddy that is covered with husk, they pound it. Avaghatataha, one has to pound it to separate it. How do I do this separation? See, in case of the paddy, the covering is of the same order of reality as the paddy. And therefore, karma is required to separate. Just like this person who showed Swamiji that precious jewel, he had to do this karma of opening the various things physically. He had to remove the covers to show the jewel. But here, as we have seen, that the cover is of a different, a lower order of reality compared to the Atma. In fact, there cannot really be a covering at all, because there can be no real relationship between Atma and Anatma. So this covering is due to ignorance, aviveka. And therefore, one doesn't have to do any karma to remove this cover. One doesn't have to physically pound to remove this cover. It's not like I have to get a hammer and start to remove all of these covers. That won't work in this case. So how is this pounding done? It says yukti avaghatataha. The pounding has to be done with yuktihi. Yuktihi means that it has to be done with reason. With logic, the pounding has to be done. But can this logic be independent? He says in Vedanta, logic is never independent logic. Independent logic cannot lead to Atma-Jnanam. So one has to use logic and reasoning that is in keeping with the Shastra. Shrutyanukula yuktihi has to use logic and reason that is in keeping with the vision of Vedanta Shastra. What kind of reasoning is this? For example, Atma is the ultimate upadana karanam, as we have seen. Atma is nothing but Brahman that is enclosed within these upadhis. And Brahman is the vivarta upadana karanam, the ultimate upadana karanam, which is never a karyam, means an effect, which is never a product. It is the ultimate cause which lends existence to the entire creation, but is never a product itself. So whatever is a product, I have to negate it as not me, not Atma. So you can go back and look at the Tika if you have the time. And we will not read it today. But you can go back and look at the Tika for this verse, and that gives this yukti that one has to use. Sthula deho na Atma. Karyatvad ghatavat. Karya bhutatvad ghatavat. So sthula deho na Atma. Karya bhutatvad, karyatvad ghatavat. So this body cannot be the Atma. Why? The Atma that Vedanta is talking about, this sthula body, cannot be that because it's a product. Any product has to be rejected as not the Atma. The Atma is the ultimate Upadana Karanam, the Vivarta Upadana Karanam, that is Brahman. Or we can use a slightly different yukti here also. Sthula Deho na Atma. Drishyatvat Ghatavat. This body cannot be the Atma because it is seen by me. What is seen cannot be the Atma. The Atma is the ultimate seer. The ultimate consciousness. Consciousness can never be seen. It is always the seer. Drigdrishyau dvau padarthau staha paraspara vilakshana. The same thing can apply to the Sukshma Sharira also. Sukshma Sharira is not the Atma. Why? Because it's a product. And it is seen by me. It's experienced by me. Or I can use Avasthatraya Viveka. Founding with Avasthatraya Viveka, that in the Jagrata Avastha, this Sthula Sharira is there, Sukshma Sharira is there. But in Swapna Avastha, this Sthula Sharira is gone. I have taken up another Sharira, Vasanamaya body I have taken up. In Swapna Avastha, this body is not there, but this I am is very much there. I say I am. Then the Swapna Avastha goes, the Sushupti Avastha comes. In Sushupti Avastha, the Sthula Sharira is not there, the Sukshma Sharira is also not there. But I am very much there in Sushupti also. Which is why on waking up, I am able to say, I slept well. So I was there during deep sleep also. Then the deep sleep goes, and then I come back to Jagrata Avastha, and then the bodies are there, and then I go to Swapna Avastha. As these states keep changing, these bodies keep coming and going. But I am continuous. I am this Atma that is independent of these bodies. Just like the sunlight continues, even though the moon comes and goes, I am continuous. The Atma continues. I am this Atma that was there in deep sleep also. I have to recall the experience of deep sleep where none of these bodies were there, but then I was very much there in the form of this Atma. So yukti avaghatata. So banging with reason, banging with these kind of prakriyas. So I am not the sthula shariram, that's like a bang. I am not the sukshma shariram, bang. I am not the karana shariram, bang. Anytime there is identification arising in my mind with the Annamaya Kosha, I am 40 years old, bang. I am not the Annamaya Kosha. I am hungry, I am thirsty, bang. I am not the Pranamaya Kosha. I am emotional, I am agitated, bang. I can never be emotional, I can never be agitated, bang, bang, bang. So with this yukti avaghatata, I separate the Atma from the Anatma. A union that was accomplished because of ignorance, I separate through this yukti. How long do I do this? Until it is very clear to me that Atma is utterly unaffected by the coming and going these attributes of the body, mind, of the Pañca Kośas, etc. And I learn to claim that I am this independent Atma, ever unaffected by the changing Anatma. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om